Okay, can you hear me? All good. James Baldwin famously said, you know this quote, I'm sure, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." Good quote, huh? Oh, nothing can be changed until it's faced. So here we are, sitting in the midst of a dire, not the of our lifetimes and of this planet's lifetime, a dire global climate emergency. This has to be faced. Three years ago, I wrote an essay called "A Vision of What Might Be: The Pandemic, Protests, and Possibilities." And in that essay, I tried to recognize and to highlight some of the things we were learning seated in the midst of this pandemic, and to suggest some of the ways that we might find ourselves with new possibilities. So, for example, we who were suddenly housebound, if we had that privilege, we didn't have to go to work, we didn't have to keep a job to feed our children. So if we had the privilege of being housebound, we suddenly saw things. And we saw people and we saw jobs. And we started seeing certain people as being absolutely indispensable, right? You remember? You remember standing on our balconies and clapping for all the hospital workers? Every evening that became a tradition all around the world. Certain people were indispensable. Now, it wasn't only hospital workers. It was also people who stocked groceries, or people who delivered our mail, for example, or people who delivered our medications, or people who worked at meat processing companies if we were meat eaters, right? And the people who stocked the grocery stores. Those people were indispensable. And then slowly, as time went on, in our fear and isolation, certain people started to become dispensable and disposable. Those orderlies working overtime at the hospitals, they could be replaced. So we went from seeing certain people as being absolutely indispensable to certain people who just became nobodies, replaceable. We started seeing these things with our own eyes. There were good parts about the pandemic, though there was much fear. We noticed, for example, that the skies became bluer as fewer cruise liners polluted the air, as fewer airplanes polluted the air, as there was less driving. You know, if we went out to walk the dog, or we went out even masked up in the late afternoons, as became our customs, the air felt fresher. So there were good parts of it, right? We could see the sky. We might have noticed that, hey, we needed less than we were constantly told that we needed to survive. We could get by on less. There were some good things. Okay. I'm trying to suggest, however, that we started to see in a new way how our lives had been and how our lives were now, and maybe there were new possibilities. Okay. And then while we were isolated at home, May 25th of 2020, at least all of us in the States watched, and then other people around the world saw a man named George Floyd be murdered. We all watched. 9 hours. First it was said 9 minutes. First it was said 8 minutes. This guy, Chauvin, has his knee on this guy's neck, and he's crying out. This big fellow, big black man, you know, cuddly, soft black person, big guy, always threatening, big black man. So 6 cops are holding him down. And we watched the 9 hours and 46 seconds, it was finally determined, that he was being murdered before our eyes. We watched, and they showed it over and over again. And we became complicit at watching brutal murder happening before our eyes. And we saw a movement that had been founded originally by 3 black women take off again, the Black Lives Matter movement. And where there had been hundreds of thousands marching earlier, this time, after George Floyd's murder, millions of people around the world marched. Globally, we all became witness to what was unjust. I know it's a climate crisis summit, but I'm suggesting that all of these things are interconnected. One of the things that is unique about Buddhism is the Buddha's discovery of dependent origination, pratītya-samutpāda. Nothing exists by itself from its own side, inherently, eternally. Every single thing that's experienceable is dependent upon something else. So nothing exists from its own side. The Buddha discovered during the 3 watches of the night, we're told, the divine eye, seeing past and future lives, and dependent origination. Now, other Indian religious traditions had discovered the divine eye. Upanishad had talked about, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad had discovered future lives and past lives and all this stuff. But dependent origination was really unique to Buddhism. And it helped orientate us, it helped us understand compassion. Why would you want to harm that thing in this world when it was you as well? That is, there was no separation, because ultimately everything is interconnected. One of the Buddha's big discoveries set him apart. So I mentioned that we watched George Floyd, and we watched that death. And Thich Nhat Hanh has been mentioned by Marshall, just mentioned him. Thich Nhat Hanh says once you see something, you can't unsee it, but once you see it, you have to act. Once you see it with your own eyes, you have to do something about it. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that once His Holiness says, it's not enough praying and meditating about something. His Holiness says this. You have to, he says, action is required. Then, I want to share this book if you don't know it. His Holiness wrote this after he met Greta Thunberg, and after she had said something that we need to take note of, 16-year-old, right? She says, our house is on fire. Any Buddhist should think of the Lotus Sutra, and the expedient means to get the children out of the fire the house that's on fire, right? She said, our house is on fire. Next sentence, it is time to panic. Right on. It's time to panic. She said this, and then she found it as young people, last talk, young people galvanized for positive things. She organized Fridays for the Future, you know. People joined her. Young folk around the world started having these Fridays for the future. Protest. Why? Because our house was on fire. You need to do something, and you need to do something now. His Holiness in this book calls for a revolution of compassion, right? This book is dedicated, it's addressed to young folk. He says, I am calling for, he actually says, a mother of all revolutions. A mother of all, His Holiness? I'm calling for the mother of all revolutions. It is a revolution of compassion, a revolution of knowing that we're connected, a revolution knowing that says, I know I don't wish to harm you because I know that would be harming myself. Just as we all know, if the earth goes under, so will we. And here we are, responsible for the sixth extinction. It won't be meteorites. It won't be killing off the dinosaurs. It's us. We are the sixth extinction. We have to turn it around. Only us, nobody else to do it for us. We should love not only beings, but the earth itself. And if we love it, like Native Americans knew in the States, it will provide for us. So, this is urgent. This is urgent. It is not a fantasy. We can see the tremendous loss of biodiversity. We can watch the Earth's water temperature steadily rise, and the glaciers around the globe melt and crash into the oceans, rising water levels around the world. This is the sixth mass extinction, the greatest one since 66 million years. And it is the direct consequence of our human actions, whose effects are intensified by technology. Now is the time for compassion. Now is the time to love the earth in order to preserve all life. Just last month, it was March 19th, the UN's meteorological organization issued what? A red alert. A red alert about global warming. Just as Aaron has shown us with the graphs, we know this is critical. We know we only have a limited time to slow down this climate disaster train we're on. We have to start right now just to slow it down. The inevitabilities that we ourselves have created. Joanna Macy begins her book, Active Hope. I'm glad so many of us have mentioned her. Oh, champion that she is. She begins her book, Active Hope, with this statement, quote, "The year 2020 began with dead birds falling from smoke-filled skies as wildfires raged in Australia. It ended with a global death toll of nearly 2 million people killed by a pandemic that was still on the rise." What we now know is that the climate scientists who had been predicting this dire situation, the climate scientists tell us now that things were moving at an even faster pace than they had seen before. We should be very, very afraid, and it is time to panic. There is no time to waste. Space and time. We only have this one small globe on which we exist that we know of. It's the only one we know where there's life. So as time seems to be running out, we shouldn't feel isolated. You know, we've had that experience with the pandemic, right? We shouldn't feel, I'm not saying we don't go there because we do feel these things, but as Joanna Macy said, we face that. We go there, we let our heart break, and then we act. We can either sit feeling afraid, confused, isolated, helpless, and hopeless, or we can try to do something about it. As Joanna Macy says, hope is a verb, it's not a noun. Hope is something we do together. I know this. I live this. I saw a president assassinated, Martin Luther King assassinated, a presidential candidate, Kennedy, assassinated. People felt hopeless. The only way we could move forward was to begin to do things together. Joanna Macy is certainly right. Hope is something we do, we create together. So that's how we get out of hopelessness, by joining together and doing something. We don't have to do it all. Judaism tells us that. We just have to do something. And then we have to find other people who will join us. So moving forward with hope and not fear. Joanna Macy, I want to end with that. I ended my essay, A Vision of What Might Be, with the idea that we Buddhists might have just the toolkit. We at least have a toolkit. We have a way, we know something about settling our minds. We know something about looking at, welcoming in anxiety and fear. We should put that to use. And if we can still our racing minds enough, we might be able to do what Rob suggests. We might be able to see a new way, like the Buddha saw a new way. We might be able to see possibilities. That's how that paper ended. We might be able to imagine a different way. And Joanna Macy, last point, and I hope that's my, I hope I make it within the 20 minutes. Joanna writes in that same text, Active Hope. She says she's walking one day and she describes a situation where she says, now, if there's going to be a solution here, I think it shouldn't call for more than the fingers and the thumb on one hand. A solution should be evident in 5. As she was walking along one day, she has this thought. It should be manageable, so no more than 5 points, she says. And then immediately, these 5 vows sprang to her mind. She said, she writes in Active Hope, I vow to myself and to each of you. 1, to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all things. 2, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume. 3, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species. To support others in work for the world and ask for help when I need it. 5, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Good vows, I think. May they be a benefit. May they be a benefit to us. Thank you.